Boa tarde. Good afternoon. My name is Patrice Brodeur, and I'll be the moderator for this third panel on cross-sector collaboration, advancing new contracts to counter hate speech. We all know that the history of religious and political relations in all the world has been at times tumultuous, at times harmonious, depending on different parts of the planet and different regions and different times in history. What we do know is that with the emergence of nation states in particular, the course of these relations have varied a lot from one country to another. And to this day, there's a great diversity of situations. In some cases, nation states have become secular, and religious communities have no longer been playing any or much role politically. And in other cases, we have around the world still majority religious countries where religion is definitely linked to the politics in direct ways. And so that diversity is what we want to find out more about today, and in particular in a European context, which brings us together for today. What are the different experiences of that relationship, which in the European context was initially simply called church-state relations, and of course now we broaden it to religion-state relations. And it's important for us to understand that we have several questions that we have presented in the start. It's all in the program. You have those questions. So I won't repeat them simply to save time. But I do want simply to tell you that we will hear the 5 presenters, the 3 in person here to my right, as well as 2 people that are online, exactly in the order that you see in the program. And I will take 1 or 2 questions after each speaker. So this way we actually can respond immediately. So both people that are in presence here in the room as well as possibly online. So without further ado, I'd like to simply invite Dr. Reverend Christian Krieger, who is the president of the Reformed Protestant Church of Alsace and Lorraine, but also president of the Conference of European Churches. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I think it's the 3rd time within 3 weeks I'm provided with a doctor title. I'm just a reverend. Thank you very much. It's the easy way to get one. So I'm happy to be with you. Given the topic, I have 5 elements of answers to that topic, examining the needs of cross-cutting collaboration to work together to combat hate speech. The first element is to establish a dialogue between religion and philosophical components of society and the political sphere. And I'm speaking there from my perspective as president of the Conference of European Churches, an organization of ecumenical cooperation based in Brussels that raises the Church's voice, Protestant, Orthodox, Anglicans, to the European institution. And the framework of that important dialogue was established in Article 17 of the Treaty of Functioning of European Union, which provides or which commits the EU institution to an open, regular, and transparent dialogue with the churches, region, communities, and also the philosophical movements. And this is quasi in a constitutional manner established this dialogue. And I think this is a first element for any cross-cutting response to hate speech. Cooperation in the fight against the hate speech cannot be satisfied with a task force mobilized in the heat of emergency of a crisis situation. It needs a dialogue that is regular, open, transparent, that is well established to facilitate debate and genuine exchange and cooperation. The second point is I'm speaking now from the perspective of a president of a church in France, and that means that I'm daily confronted in my daily life with laicity, you know, this principle underlying the radical separation between the government and religions in France. And this laicity brings in France more or less a culture of suspicious about religion. And I want to say a few words about that. And precisely in last July, the government stated a law reinforcing the respect of the principle of the Republic, a law which is, although it targets certain groups using radical Islam discourse, affects all religions. The purpose of this law is to provide the state with means to control the world of religion on French territory. And this law introduces a culture of suspicion toward all form of religion. And we know how suspicion and ignorance are the breeding ground for stigmatization and hate speech. A culture of suspicion towards the world of religions, which is moreover globalized, seems to me, on the one hand, to favor hate speech, and on the other hand, to be a real handicap for implementing a concerted and transversal fight against hate speech. Cooperation in fighting hate speech requires mutual respect between the various actors involved. The third point, hate speech or combating hate speech, an internal challenge for religions. It states in the topic that religious and belief identities are among those targeted or instrumentalized by hate speech. And religious leaders are not only well placed to tackle this problem, they are faced with the absolute need to do so. Firstly, I think there are two ideas. Religious leaders must themselves address this issue of religious radicalism. By that, I'm referring to the exclusive discourse based on a divine revelation which rejects cultural and religious otherness, as well as sometimes submission to fundamental rules of a state. Radical religious discourse, from which no religion escapes, is a breeding ground for misunderstanding and hate speech. In order to clearly distance oneself from any form of radicalism, it is essential that every religious leader is committed to an interreligious dialogue and to interreligious cooperation for justice, peace within the society. In this way, he or she helps to show that religions are not only part of the problem, but can and should be part of the solution. Religions cannot just claim to be victims. They have to eradicate within their own constituency factors and conditions that contribute to the phenomenon. And furthermore, I think religious leaders should show that they too are part of the civil society, not as a force apart, not above society, but as part of a whole. They must teach that all religions have a vocation to be agent of meaning and humanity, agent of social and cultural links or relations, and also agent for social action and solidarity. This such self-understanding makes it clear that religions are component of civil society and helps them to be accepted as such by state structures and political leaders to cooperate and fight against hate speech. The fourth point is hate speech needs to be united in action. This was already said, I think, the whole morning. This being united in action, I just want to underline one point, is that because the hate speech is going ahead on social media on the same ground that the populist rhetoric, I think this unity is all the more necessary as the recurrence of hate speech tend to trivialize the latter, blunting the capacity of indignation. And we need to stand together. And I want to quote a French doctor who was deported to Auschwitz because she refused to remove the yellow star she wore in solidarity with the Jews. And she said, "The worst foolishness, like the worst atrocities, takes on the appearance of legitimacy when it is thought of, shared, and carried out by the environment in which one lives. From consent to consent, one reaches irreversible decay." It's very interesting to see that we need to stand together to be active on that. And the last point, very quickly, the need, but Thomas already spoke about it this morning, the need of representativeness. In order to mobilize an effective contribution of religions to fight against hate speech, another condition must be met. Religions must better structure their representativeness. Religions are struggling to set up a real representative structure which can legitimately voice their opinions and concern. The multiplicity of speakers reflecting an archipelago of spirituality, NGOs, theological nuances, religious cultures, institutional histories, does not favor the emission of an audible, clear message, nor the effective cooperation with the political authorities. Religious family urgently need to structure their representativeness. I think on the European level, to give this example, Christianity seems to have a clear and relative efficient structure. We have the Catholic Commissary and KEC, and we try to speak together. We have also the European Rabbis Conference, representative body, only rabbis, not clergy and lay, and that's it on the European level. The result is a double deficit, the lack of representative structure for each larger religious family, and also the lack of a platform of inter-religious cooperation gathering together within one entity, the representative of all religious family. And I see here really a condition, a sine qua non condition, for an effective contribution by regions to fight against hate speech in a transversal manner. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Please remain. We'll immediately turn to the audience in the room. I don't have yet any questions coming from the online participants. So, Amanda, por favor.
Thank you. If I may take this for the question?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My name is Amanda Figueras from Spain, from Foro Abraham, which is an association for fostering the interdialogue and the interfaith dialogue. I really appreciate your words, especially where you were saying about the lack of representation. And I was thinking, for these days, during these days, I was thinking about something I would like to share with you my thoughts. Because I think maybe it's important to have this in mind, of course. Maybe you already have. Also, I think we are talking about hate speech, but we, maybe, or some of us, maybe are not the ones who are most affected by the problem, because somehow we have some privileges, you know, so somehow some of us we are not that on the ground. So also I think it is important that we develop channels so we can have this communication from down to top. So we have good ears to listen what is happening down. You know, unfortunately, I have been suffering this, so I'm sorry. So this, yeah, it was my thing. I have the second thing I want to add. So first, to develop those channels so we can hear from down to give them the opportunity, yeah, down and up. And the second thing, and this is a problem, personal problem I have with one word. This is about the religious radicalism. Yeah, I cannot cope with this word. Why? Because in the context of Islam, you know. It's like utilized constantly. Like the other day, in the case of Norway, we have been listened today about that in the news. The day after, 2 days after, there was a case of there was attack with Islamic motivation. How comes Islamic motivation? So first, we have to truly, deeply understand that a radical Islamic person could be a super good person, maybe, but not a terrorist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perhaps to say that we all need to be radical believers, that means fundamental believers in the gospel or in God, I would say. So I'm absolutely right. And we have, as Protestants, also our radicals. I would say. It's not just a Muslim problem. It's a cross problem, but each religion needs to deal with. And a second sentence, I didn't say my conclusion, but it's for you now. Any infringement on the religious expression of a particular person or community is an infringement on the freedom of religion at all. And on the same, any hate speech towards any minority is a hate speech to all religions. So I feel really concerned by any hate speech. We can't say, that, oh, I'm not concerned. In France, okay, the Protestants are not really tackled. But hate speech will affect religions, I think. The more societies become secular, the more we will have this problem.
Good. Thank you. Merci. There's 3 more questions. Okay, very briefly, I'll just go, okay, just state your question, and then we'll see if you have time to address them, okay?
Thank you. Markus Ladstätter from Austria with Catholic background.
Mm-hmm.
The example you gave us about France is quite impressive, of course, the struggle between state and religion. Actually, I think this is the model we are facing in many European countries now, more and more. The question in a modern way is now, who is able to guarantee a humane world? Is it the state or is it the religions? Mm. And I see that, at least from my Austrian perspective, this comes more and more up, this question. Mm. And the problem is that there is an increasing number of people without thinking much about the question, but just thinking, of course, it's the state. The state is neutral. Mm. And all religions have to face this problem and to understand that it's their common concern, not the concern of one religious community because of this or that fault. My expectations for the future are quite big. It's an ambiguous thing. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, we have a lack. We have a lack. I wrote in a paper today that the president of the French Protestant Federation says liberté, égalité, fraternité, spiritualité. Yeah, to say that there is a need, and the state can't provide all the meanings for the society. But that's also why the regions should behave themselves and are aware that we are a component of the civil society and we are bringing meanings, social links, cultural links, also with the background of our singing and the art and so on. So deeply, we are a component of the civil society. That was one of my statements. And that's also why I underlined in the first point, Article 17 on the European level, that the dialogue should be regular, open and transparent. That is the ground for that. And we don't have this in France, so I absolutely agree to what you said.
Oui, bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour.
So I'm Farhad, I'm from Iraq, a refugee in France. I'm leading an organization called Voice of Yazidi based in Paris to advocate for the survivors of genocide of 2014. This is not what I want to say. I feel that in the new laws and the policies that have been made to overcome the radicalism, but they are also using radical way to overcome. It's just like to make a peace by arm. For me, that's what I understand. I hope I'm wrong. The second thing, you always not when I say you, it's not a personal, being used that other religions, all religion. But when I'm deep in the reading such laws and articles and policy that have been made, as for religious minority, I don't see they have been counting us as this part because they only took the elements for Islam, Jewish, Christianity, and made this law. And within this law, the minority have been completely discriminated and marginalized. Yeah. And this is not an idea, I say, or a belief. It's just a fact. What you think is possible, to what extent we can include more the minorities?
The real difficulty is that we are sur un chemin de crête. Now, I don't know the word in English, but when you speak about hate speech, you have also the culture of the freedom of expression. And you know that in the Anglo-Saxon world, the court is to say there are no limits, because freedom is really underlined. And I would say in European culture, at least in France, we have limits. Any racist speech or any contestation of the Shoah, this is a delict, and so we have limits. So there are two cultures, it's not easy. What is clear that all the times the minorities in each religion are the most tackled and are facing the question of religious freedom or expression. Freedom is possible, but the religious expression is not all the times given. Thank you.
And last, very brief answer as well, please.
Yes, I'm just wondering whether the question of reflection also is sometimes misunderstood as critique. I'm referring maybe to the Taliban in Afghanistan, which is a radical group, I would say. And is it then already criticizing Islam if I'm criticizing the Taliban and their radical laws and way of life?
I would just say, for me, what is important is the capacity of each religion to live in plural society with others and to acknowledge otherness, cultural otherness and religious otherness. And if religious leaders or region are not able to that, then I would speak about radicalism. But I know that Muslims, Jews, Christians and others are able to do so.
Merci beaucoup. Vielen Dank. So thanks for all your questions and the answers, starting the dialogue in a nice, concrete way. It is now time to turn to our second speaker, who will be speaking online from Austria, from Vienna, and is Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Teresa Injane, who is the head of the cultural policy at the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, willkommen. Bitte sehr.
Obrigada. Hello to everybody from Vienna. And thank you in advance for listening to me. In a way, as I was listening to Weber and Krieger, I thought maybe my short text that I prepared for you is replying to certain items now with structure. I will speak, since I'm a civil servant and a diplomat, I will speak about some structural ideas that the Austrian state had in dealing with religion and also regarding hate speech. I would like to start by pointing out that the relationship between state and religion, as Patrice Brodeur said in the beginning, differs in each country depending on past political and societal developments. Let us briefly look at some key historic moments in our part of the world, in Austria. In 1781, Emperor Joseph II issued the Edict of Tolerance for Austria. It allowed other confessions and limited freedom of worship. Religious freedom was declared a constitutional right in Cisleithania, that's the former northern and western part of Austria-Hungary, in 1867, thus recognizing the numerous religions besides Catholicism, such as Greek, Serbian, Romanian, Russian, and Bulgarian Orthodox Christians. Austria neighbored the Ottoman Empire for centuries, both Calvinist and Lutheran Protestants and Jews. In 1912, following the annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Islam was officially recognized as a state religion, a very important step in our history. This was our way of organizing tolerance among religions by legal recognition. Today, Austria is becoming a more secular society. According to a report from 2018, only 14% of adults are considered to be highly religious. Despite the religious and ideological neutrality, equal distance, the Austrian state, of course with the Catholic tradition, is acutely aware of the positive effects religious and faith-based actors can have on society, including encountering hate speech. We interfaith-based actors. Chief Rabbi Rosen, member of the board of directors of KAICIID, framed this very bluntly a few days ago at the Religions for Peace conference in Lindau. He said, if you don't want religions to be part of the problem, then make them part of the solution. So, which are the structures in our country for interfaith coordination today? The officially recognized religious communities in Austria meet twice a year through the platform for churches and religious society to discuss current political issues pertaining to religion and state. They talk about the contributions that religions can make for peaceful coexistence in Austria. These encounters are deemed very useful and allow the religious leaders to cultivate interfaith relationships and to talk to the state. This very constructive collaboration has led to joint statements and political action, for example, also after the terrible attack in Vienna in November
Vielen Dank, Your Excellency. Very concrete examples from Austria. That's much appreciated, both in terms of principles and structures, and I think that that's what we're looking for. So thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes.
I'm not sure if the panelists can see me. So I'm okay. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Rumeisa Dior-Kvider, and I am Viennese, and I'm living also in Austria and Vienna, and can also talk about my experience, what we are doing when we are countering hate speech. So I am working for the Documentation and Counseling Center Islamophobia and Anti-Muslim Racism. And what we have seen the last 2 or 3 years is that there is a lot or a shrinking of civic space for Muslim communities and for Muslim religious faith-based organizations. I can show you some examples, and I'd like to hear about your opinion about this. But after the terror attack on 2020, there had been some kind of very disruptive government state measurements. One of those would be the house rates, another one would be the change of the Islamic law, and the other actions which was also coming from a state organizations called Documentation Center of Political Islam. It's the Islamic map, where a lot of religious actors and a lot of religious organizations which has been perceived as Muslim, and doesn't even need to be Muslim, but perceived as Muslim, had been localized, and perpetrators who are not even far right, but also like people who has any anti-Muslim hatred, located organizations and also the religious actors to go there and do some kind of Islamophobic acts. So what I was saying, or what I was experiencing, is that as a community where we are trying, as a Muslim community, where we are trying to do any good participation inside of the Austrian government, we are seeing that there is hindering barriers which are a little bit negative and destructive when it comes to engaging Muslim communities and engaging Muslim actors and activists. So what I was asking myself is, how can we achieve a good collaboration between the Austrian government and the Muslim community organizations when we want to do something which is good for the society, when we want to work solidarity, and when we want to be respectful in every way, or I don't know, also in a good communication with each other. Thank you.
Thank you for this excellent question. Any response?
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I wholeheartedly understand you. I think what it takes now, the situation changes, sometimes internal politics gets very, say, heated. I think we all have, as civil servants, as individuals, as civil society institutions, stick to our values and persevere and continue with the values and the ideals that we believe in, and then things might change. Sometimes the political arena changes. It has changed in Austria over the years. It might change again. But we stick to our values, This is all I can tell you from my perspective. I'm a diplomat. I'm not making policy in Austria or advising policy in Austria. We do foreign cultural relations. But I do hear you and I understand you, and this landscape made us very sad as well.
So vielen Dank, Ambassador Jane, for your response to obviously a sensitive area that requires a lot of dialogue and collaboration. So thank you to both of you. I'd like now to turn to our third speaker, who is the Chief Imam of the Scottish Ahlul Bayt Society, and his name is Chief Imam Syed Aliabas Razawi. And so please, Imam Razawi, the floor is yours at the microphone. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here and to listen and learn from this discussion that's been taking place from this morning. Look, a lot has been said, and I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but I think to put things into context is going to be important for me. So if you allow me a minute and 30 seconds to put things into context, I can then go on and try and answer some of these questions. Our discussion today is on hate speech, and as you've already heard what the definition of hate speech is, just to take three parts of this hate speech, it is basically communication or communicating in speech, writing, or behavior. That which attacks, you could say, or discriminates in terms of language, religion, ethnicity, or in reference to people, group of people, color and race, and so forth. You can already see it's a very broad context, and if we were to bring it onto the European context, I think there'd be many organizations, countries, and so forth would fit into that. But again, it's open to interpretation. The second thing I feel it's important to put into context is the fact that Europe is not a homogeneous entity. If you look at Europe as a continent, you'll find that there are different approaches to inter-religious dialogue and collaboration. So you may have those countries who have a more encompassing understanding, and they believe in dialogue, which is a very good thing. But then again, you'll have other countries, for argument's sake, who have a very select idea of dialogue. So they may engage with certain countries, or certain religions, and they may not engage with certain religions. You have those countries that have official religions that they engage in, but then you'll have religions who may not be official in that particular country, so therefore dialogue is off the table. Then you have those countries who have a very strict form of laïcité, and in this you find that there is no official engagement with religions, and if there is engagement, then it's through various civic organizations. And then after that, then you have those countries who in fact are not very progressive in terms of engaging with faiths or religious communities. And in fact, they make it very difficult for those religions to actually exist in those countries within those parameters. And so therefore, in the last 2 years, you've seen migration from certain European countries to maybe other European countries, or even to North America or the Middle East. So really, that's the context. Our difficulty is straight away there in terms of, firstly, interpretation of definition of what hate speech is. And then the second thing, I guess, which is important is which country you're dealing with. Within the European context, it's very difficult to actually look at the various countries and to see which country is open to dialogue. And even those countries which are open to dialogue, many a time you find that because of their engagement in dialogue, they forget their responsibilities and duties to religious communities. So that's the context. I've taken 2 minutes, I apologize. But accelerating forward now, what are we seeing? What are the positives? What are the negatives? Look, I guess at this moment, what you're finding is that cross-sector engagement is far more progressive, in many ways is far more effective. So what you see is that religion across Europe is deeply rooted. Regardless of laicity, you do find in communities deeply rooted in religions. And I find that there is a two-tier approach which is quite effective. If I could call out some good practice, for example, within Germany, for example, in Scotland that I come from, Portugal itself, two-tier system. One, religious leaders, second, grassroots. And I think both are going to be effective if we're going to build cohesive cohesive societies, engage religion and integration. And again, it's important for this two-sector, you could say two-tier approach to take place if we're going to eradicate forms of hate speech, or at least identify them. What has been working? Well, I'll give you an example. When governments and social media companies, tech companies come together with faith-based organizations, you've seen that very effectively work. Examples are you've got the likes of Tell Mama, Imams Online, or the Jewish organization CST, who have been working quite phenomenally with social media companies to root out hate crime or hate language, speech, and so forth online. And I find that this formulae does tend to work. When you have the government or civic organizations, you've got the media companies, and at the same time you've got faith-based organizations. At this moment in time, you don't actually find direct involvement of religion, but you do have faith-based organizations who may represent religious communities. And I find that that is something which is working. This, you could say, marriage of these through sectors are working very well. Unfortunately, nevertheless, what you're not seeing is an equal partnership. You still find that religion as a resource in Europe, it isn't an equal partner. So therefore, what happens is that we can tap into religious communities, we can ask for advice from religious communities, but the one thing which is missing, and it will continue to cause a problem, is when there is no equal partnership. And this is why when you have countries who are engaging in Europe with religious communities and not engaging with other religious communities, what that leads to is an acceleration of hate crimes. You know, if I was to say, again, Chatham House rules, I was speaking to a very senior rabbi just earlier on, I haven't asked his permission, but I'll mention what he said. He said when, for example, we're engaged and the Muslim community may not be engaged, what that leads to immediately is a rise in hate speech or hate crime, which has a knock-on effect on us, and it's actually very counterproductive. What that tells us is that partnership is extremely important. Take it a step further. What are the models, you could say, which are working? I think the following models are going to be very important. I think first and foremost, religious literacy. Now, what you find in the European context, you have, for example, the religious literacy leadership program over 80 different universities in Europe. You have the OIC itself, you have the network of European federations, Imams Online and so forth. So there are institutions, or you could say there are organizations who are actually working very hard in terms of religious literacy. And again, ignorance is very difficult. Sometimes you find policymakers not understanding a particular religion, and in the same way you have religious leaders not understanding other religious leaders or other religious institutions, or in fact, the law of the land, or even in fact, where policymakers are coming from. Look, there was a particular comment which was made, I think, let me just address that comment as well. Comment was made that there are certain institutions, for example, the Jewish community may have its institution, the Christian communities may have its institutions. What about the other communities? Look, just remember one thing. Certain communities, religions have been around for a very long time in Europe. Some have a history dating back 400 years. Others have a history potentially dating back 1,500 years. If I look at it from an Islamic perspective, the majority of Muslims potentially sitting in this room may be first, second, or third generation. 100 years is not enough to be able to establish those networks, resources, and so forth. So let me take it one step further. What we're seeing is that there are opportunities for people today or organizations who are aware as to how to navigate the social and political climate. But for those people who are migrants, to give you an example, in the last 15 years or so, the Afghani community, the Iraqi community, the Pakistani community, and so forth, for them at the moment to navigate politically, socially, or civic is problematic. Why? Because many of them may not speak the language, have not gone through a process of integration, so it's difficult. Therefore, if we want to work collaboratively, it is the responsibility of those institutions or those religious institutions who have been here much longer to perhaps guide or help, or as one says, look out for thy neighbor. So look, I think the first thing, as I mentioned, just wrapping up now, it brings an end to my 7 minutes. First thing is religious literacy. But who should that religious literacy go to? I would say police, lawyers, journalists should be on that list. Because today what you're seeing is you're seeing hate speech in the name of freedom of speech. And it's actually coming from lawmakers, lawyers, journalists, policymakers. So I think firstly, religious education is important. What else is important? Collaboration. Collaboration is extremely important, and this is where you see with this collaboration there seems to be a decrease in hate speech or hate crimes. Furthermore, remember, the job of the government, I would say, at least within Europe, is to supply or make the foundations so that pluralism can prevail. And at the moment I am seeing at least an attack on pluralism within the European context. So remember, pluralism means for everyone a voice. Pluralism is an acceptance. And from that you'll see integration. If you want the integration process to work effectively, you've got to make that framework so that we can have pluralism, so that we can educate, so that there can be collaboration, and so that there can be religious literacy. Final point is this. Today you are seeing collaboration on an Abrahamic level. Also remember that religion is wider than that. We are not seeing that type of integration, we could say collaboration between the Dharmic and the Abrahamic faiths. Conclusion. I'd say conclusion is this. We're living in very interesting times. If I was living in China, they would say that that's negative to say that we're living in very confusing, very, you could say, intolerant times, but nevertheless we are living in times which are interesting. I think it's important for us to work together. And what has worked so far is when that governments, civic society, and religions do come together as a triad or a trinity to work together. We have seen toolkits. We've seen KAICIID has a toolkit. Religions for Peace developed a toolkit. So we do have toolkits for religious literacy, for education. But my final thing is this. Please, let's continue to have this dialogue. Let's continue to work together, collaborate, and let's not get offended. Before we get to a conclusion, we're potentially going to offend each other only because of the fact that we don't know each other yet. But when we do begin to know each other, what you will see is that you'll see from friendships, this offensiveness will go, and I think acceptance and tolerance and goodwill will prevail. Thank you very much.
Many thanks indeed, Imam Razawi. We have two questions in the back over there. I forget, oh, the microphone is there anyway. So briefly, right, one after another.
Thank you, Milica Pesic, Media Diversity Institute, London. I really admired what you said, and I'll start with the offending issue. One of the reasons why journalists do not dare to go to religious actors or leaders, because I can say because that's my background, even though I'm wearing a civil society organization's hat, we don't know enough. And then we are constantly worried that we would offend any of you because we don't know. That's one. So my question to you is, Chief Imam, you mentioned the media, and I'm so pleased because everyone is somehow avoiding to mention media openly and directly, and responsibility, particularly responsibility of legacy media. What's your experience with media? Have you and your colleagues have been trained in how to talk to media? Are there any initiatives where you sit together and learn from each other? What are, deconstructing journalism, deconstructing, religion? So how does it work?
I think that's a very important question and a very important observation that you've made. Again, to come back, I think it's important, as you said, that there needs to be workshops, or at least there needs to be a level of education between both media and religious leaders. As far as my own experiences go, in terms of social media, yes, we've had some level of training in terms of workshops held by Facebook or Google or others. In terms of print media or mainstream media, such as the BBC, CNN, and others, unfortunately, I don't think that there are enough workshops where religious actors can come together with media actors. So I do feel that that's important to go forward. What we can do, nevertheless, is we can act as a resource to be able to provide, let's say, workshops for the media. And what I would like from the media is for media companies to at least invite religious representatives or leaders to have a dialogue or a conversation. Because what we see at the moment, especially in the mainstream press, is really sensationalism. So religion is portrayed in the light of sensationalism, and what you therefore have is that you have stories which are coming out which for many religious leaders are not factual. There seems to be no collaboration taking place. If we are looking for a society of peace and a society of tolerance, I think this dialogue is going to be extremely important for the right message to go out through the media.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you for this very interesting talk you gave, and it is very clear that you're highly educated on many levels. And I wanted to raise that point that you, as an imam, you could also be a publisher of media, and you could even spin these current challenges by calling out the bad actors within your communities and the radicals, and even use religious text to condemn it. But to condemn deeply un-Islamic behavior, which is taking place in radicalized communities. So is that something you're already doing? Is that something you're having in mind? What is the status quo right now?
So again, if I just go back to unpack some of what you've said, I don't believe that Islamic fundamentalism is as rampant as your question has just raised. I think it'd probably be a very minute section of the community. So let's say, for example, if
Not
I'm...
in Europe, but if you look
Yeah.
to Afghanistan, if you look to Iraq, Syria, I think it's very rampant.
Yeah, so my responsibility is Europe. But so remember, Islam is 1.3 or 4 billion people, right? So, okay, if you want to move away from the European context, let's move away from the European context. So my frame is Europe. I can tell you that there's no radicalization as far as I know in any mosque. Right? But anyhow, now, if you go to the Middle East, I think within the Middle East, take Iraq for an example. The Pope has just come to Iraq, a visit took place. Ayatollah Sistani, the Pope met. There's been multiple statements which have come out to the extent that Ayatollah Sistani himself has said the Christians are part of our souls, the Sunnah are part of our souls, the Shi'i, the Jews, people of that land. I think many religious leaders have come forward to speak against fundamentalism, to speak against terrorism. And what you find is that terrorism, as it is now, did not exist, let's say maybe pre-9/11. You go to Afghanistan today, we all know what's taking place in Afghanistan in the sense that the people of Afghanistan are not very happy with a takeover that's taken place in a week, which is quite miraculous, but there must have been other things behind the scenes taking place. So I think to conflate politics and religion or orthodox religion is, I think it's a gray area. I wouldn't go as far as that, but yes, religious leaders, I believe, have stood up. You know, we've got documentations of hundreds of religious leaders having signed documents, having taken the media waves. But unfortunately, we still find a political element which does rise, which does go down, depending on the political climate. So no, I think both Shia, Sunni, and others as well, Ismaili, you know, for example, the Bohra community, many of the communities within the House of Islam have officially and openly talked against terrorism, but within context, it's a minute amount in comparison to the over 1 billion Muslims. And let's be honest, even if 10% of Muslims were like that, you'd have problems all over the world. It wouldn't be where we are today. So without downplaying it, yes, it's a problem, but I don't think it's a problem within Orthodox Islam. It is where you find a lack of centralization. Within Islam, with the centralization, there's no terrorism. Or at least I don't have a case in front of me of terrorism with its centralization. And I do find conversation taking place. Hence you see so many religious leaders here today and who have been in the last 3 days with the purpose of wanting to dialogue, with the purpose of having cohesive and integrated societies. So that would be my answer. But again, I'm limited to Europe, not the Middle East. I can't speak for what's taking place in Syria. I cannot speak for what's taking place in Afghanistan. There is a brother actually here from Afghanistan, you may want to ask him. But again, from what I know of religious leaders, of Muslim leaders, they've been working around the clock, I believe, the last 20 years to try and refute the fact that they're not terrorists.
Good. Khayri Mutshakkiram. Many thanks to Chief Imam Razawi. Thanks for your question and the answers as well. These are important questions. We live in an interdependent world, and so even though the focus is more European here, there are impacts in Europe about what's happening elsewhere and vice versa. And so these are important questions to dialogue about. So thank you to all of you. And in terms of statements and responses, if you want to see me afterwards, I can provide sort of links to websites that have actually lists of several different kinds of statements. And I've written myself an article on that, on listing sort of 20 more declarations from Muslims responding to the kind of rise of extremism and radicalization and whatnot. So, so please come and be in touch with me about that later on. Yes?
It's just the way media has changed. So
yes.
To issue statements, it maybe no longer reaches the people who use hate speech. So
Good point.
We have to rethink on how we make those statements and create content which really refutes hate speech through religious text. And this is some of the findings we also worked on.
Right, thank you. And this is very important what you're saying. It's expanding sort of the ways in which we respond adapting to some of the realities that have emerged from the social media. And that's, I think, a valuable sort of feedback, I think. And I just want to let you know that KAICIID does a social media training for people that are influencers, that are already sort of active on social media, on how to use dialogue in the media, in the social media spaces. And so part of that is already in the works, and we've done that in Iraq, bringing all 8 different religious communities of Iraq, as well as more broadly speaking on the Arab platform, among other places, and it's expanding. So just to give some concrete examples in that direction that you're suggesting, and rightly so. So thank you very much, and so to both of you. Thank you. Yes. Okay, so it's now time to move to our 4th presenter. It's Reverend Dr. Laurent Bassanese, who is working as an official at the Holy See in Rome and represents the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. So, à vous la parole, Dr. Laurent Bassanese.
Merci, Professor Broder. Thank you for the opportunity to participate to this wonderful panel. So there are so many questions that I've already been aroused. So from my point of view and from the point of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, first of all, I would say as a preamble that if we do speak of separation in some countries like France between the state and the church, state and religions, and this year we are celebrating the centenary of the resumption of diplomatic relations between France and the Holy See. They had been interrupted for almost 20 years following conflicts over faith-based schools, that is to say, over the formation of the youth, which is quite important. On the part of the Church, of the Catholic Church, we speak more of distinction of competences, the spiritual and the temporal, without fusion, no strict separation, therefore, in view of building together the world, which is our world. We all live in the same world, and Pope Francis often repeats, we are all in the same boat. No one is saved alone. So it is my first preamble. The second one is the church, religions in general, and the state. We cannot remain static. They are living entities, if you like, and if they stop evolving, they run the risk of sclerosis and death. This is why the Catholic Church opened 10 days ago an enormous work of reflection and prayer called Synod. Synod, which means in Greek, walking together. Walking all together, that is to say, the bishop, the leaders, the Christian faithful, with the Pope, to see, in order to see, to discern in which direction to go in communion, that is to say, in communication all together, relationships, mutual knowledge, in order to be more at the service of God and man. States and international organizations, according to me, must also question the real effectiveness of their bureaucratic structures and evolve to avoid a paralysis, which is society, as said Reverend Christian Eger, there is not a strict separation. We are religious people, also human beings belonging to our society, and relations, distinction and relations, internal relations, and between us. Relations entails being capable of reforms. As far as our theme is concerned, hate speech, we know, and as John said, it has been said several times, that it generally comes from an ignorance of the other, of his culture, of his way of functioning, and that there is a direct link between the ideology that incites hatred and terrorist crime. And here I quote, and just quoting the new rector of the Great Mosque of Paris, Shams Eddin Hafiz, very clearly states this sentence. There is a direct link between ideology that incites hatred and terrorist crime. He just wrote a book entitled Le Manifeste contre le terrorisme islamique, écoutez-moi, which means the manifesto against Islamic terrorism, listen to it, 2021. We have seen too much of this with the horrors committed by ISIS and other groups. Today, in order to try to understand the other, and this is a never-ending task because the other is essentially a mystery, it is absolutely necessary to no longer have and to no longer teach the binary approach to reality, or a frontal or aggressive one, that of the always victorious warrior hero who comes to bring his solutions. The secularist, on the one hand, who brings his solution, the Buddhist, who brings his solution, the Catholic, the Protestant, the Muslim, etc. On the contrary, it is vital today to form a man who is flexible, complex, articulating himself, relation with himself, and with the world, with the others. A man who listens to the others. During the visit of Pope Francis to Morocco 2 years ago, March 13, 2019, some weeks after the publication of the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together, signed by the Pope and the Grand Imam of El-Azhar, Ahmed El-Tayyib, King Mohammed VI, so the King of Morocco, invited everybody to go beyond the classic interreligious and intercultural dialogue, which means a simple face-to-face of two or more worlds, and promote a renewed education to confront violence, radicalism, hate speech. Punctuating his text with Quranic verses, the passage from the King's welcome speech deserves to be read carefully. I quote, "The dialogue between Abrahamic religions," and we could add dialogue with the state and with all other realities, "is manifestly insufficient in today's world. As paradigms change everywhere and above all, interreligious dialogue must also change. The dialogue focuses on tolerance, you have your beliefs and principles, and I have mine, and it is okay. This dialogue will last a long time, but will not achieve its purpose. The three Abrahamic religions do not exist to tolerate each other out of fatalist resignation or of the acceptance. They exist to open up to each other and to get to know each other, quoting the Quran, in a valiant competition to do each other good. Radicalisms, whether religious or not, are based on the non-knowledge of the other, ignorance of the other, ignorance in general. Co-knowledge is a denial of all forms of radicalism. And it is this co-knowledge that will allow us to face the challenges of our troubled present. To deal with radicalism, hate speech, the answer is
briefly, if we could conclude soon. Thank you.
Hillary, a life sentence is a secret death penalty and it must be abolished. But then, now, how do we deal with people, groups, states, ISIS, or certain governments also, that promote violence and hatred of one another? If on the one side of the church, the principles are clear, according to the rector of the Great Mosque of Paris, whom I've read just one passage of his book, the states, all the states, must really choose their interlocutors well, be extremely vigilant with fundamentalist movements, quintessence of hypocrisy and lies, he says. And at the same time, he opens wide the door to collaboration and common construction with other religions and civil society. So my question, that can feed our debate, how to choose the right interlocutors in practice? Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Let's open up for some questions, comments, reactions. We have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Amina. I'm coming from Bosnia-Herzegovina. I have a question about the education because I am firmly with you that we have to renew the education, but my question is, how do we do it and who should be responsible for that? From whom it should start? Should it start from us, the civil society or religious leaders, or from the government? I think it should be a collaborative effort, but who should start working on it? And another point about the dialogue with those who spread hate speech is actually that I think we have to think how we can do that. Because until now, we mostly speak to the people who are already, let's say, preaching to the converted, those who are already, they're called like movable middle, the ones who are already ready to, stop spreading hate speech or not spread it. But how do we really come to those who are doing hate speech, and how do we actually dialogue with them? And is it possible, because you asked us this question, so I'm just giving it back to you. Like, what would be your answer? Because I was doing a hate speech campaign, and I was trying to dialogue on social media with those who actually spread hate speech. And I have to say, like, it's not easy. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's not easy at all. But for the first question, yes, it should be a collective movement. This reform of education, and who should start? We are starting now. We all should start together. We don't have to wait that the other will begin, because otherwise nobody will move. So there is this initiative from Pope Francis, but okay, it is him. And listen who wants to listen. Gather who wants to gather around, not around him, together, in order to reform, maybe to rethink the role of the universities in the world, to reform the manuals, to reform our way of teaching, of meeting people. Because also in the academic world, I'm also a professor at the Pontifical Gregorian University, we have also narrow-minded, and we are specialists in one topic, and we don't see what the other think, how he behave, how he consider the others.
Thank you.
For the second question,
Sorry.
how to dialogue with people? Yes, this is my question actually. Sometimes, so in fact, I already have some beginning of answers. As for the new rector of the Great Mosque of Paris, we should not enter into dialogue with radicalist movements. We should close the mosque or others. We have just, the French government has just closed 3 days ago, the mosque in France who promoted anti-Semitism and hate speech. So these groups also exist in Europe, unfortunately. According to him, yes, we should not speak with them. We should not even speak with the Taliban. According to him, no, we are playing with the fire. The states are playing with the fire. According to me, as a religious person, I am ready to speak with everybody. And to try why he thinks like this. But it is mine, and it is the Catholic point of view. But it's not easy at all, as you underline very well. I agree.
Thank you. On this point, I have to interject. In North America, we talk about the need to be more inclusive, to invite more people at the table of dialogue. The problem is that some people, even if you invite them, they don't come to the table. So even if you expand the table, they don't still come. So then the next question is, well, maybe we need to bring the table to where they are, or bring ourselves where they are, rather, and just be where they are. And that requires an extra effort, and it's really much more proactive. So anyway, thank you. I'm closing here. Farhad, very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. I like the fact that you mentioned the ideology behind the hate speech. It's really linked directly with the terrorism acts, let's say. And then to link what you said with how we can we dialogue with those people who's not possible to dialogue. But then my question, it will be added, who are actually these terrorists? Given the fact that ISIS was isolated, according to what's seen with the media, Turkey is against, Saudi Arabia is against, Iran is against, Iraq is against, so ISIS is closed. And I was in Sinjar Mountain, north of Iraq, in 2016. The Toyota cars were used by ISIS. In 2016, model Toyota, that's been 1 month delivered from the company Toyota. How this reached? So let's not deal with the people who actually support ISIS, who make ISIS, who help ISIS. Here, I will say, if we say ISIS as an example, Erdogan is a clear creator and supporter. The Kurdish politician in the north of Iraq, we have evidence about that, but our state, religion, in all level, without any reservation, they are dealing just based on the fact that these people have power, and okay, we have to accept them, even they are helper, supporter, creator, and ISIS people. Then we are not speaking about a fighter who's uneducated in the ground that kill people. We are speaking about how this fighter got opportunity to have an American weapon and have a Toyota 4X car that to come kill me and my family.
Thank you. Laurent? Father Laurent?
It's really true. Yes, I don't have to add anything. I agree with you. Yes, I don't know how to manage these people and how they are supported. But ideology is present. Ideology is present beyond. It's unseizable. You cannot. Ideology is present in the ideas, in the education, in the way you want or you don't want to communicate, to relation with others. So it's a long way to change, but it's possible.
Merci beaucoup, Père Laurent. Many thanks to you and to all the questions. I would like to now move to our last speaker. And just to be fair for our last speaker, so that he can also have an overall period of 15 minutes like everybody else did, more or less, I would ask you if it's okay to end at 35 instead of 30. So this way we can have actually 15 minutes with the question and answer with our last speaker as well. Is that agreeable to all of you? You'll have a 25-minute break instead of 30-minute break. Does that work? Yeah. And if you have to leave, we'll understand also. So thank you for that little flexibility. So our last speaker is Mr. Abdesamad El-Yazidi, who actually carries two important hats in Germany. The first one, and it's been for already 4 years, he's the General Secretary of the Central Council of Muslims in Germany. But more recently, a few months ago, he's been named a spokesperson for the Coordination Council of all Muslims in Germany. So we have an important representative here in many ways of Muslims in Germany with us today. So please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello everybody. Assalamu alaikum. At first, because I'm the last speaker today, I have to say thank you to all the speakers before for their great speeches and for their inspired words. Thank you very much to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we spoke a little bit about Austria and French. Let's go to Berlin, let's go to Germany. In Germany, there is already some kind of cooperation between policymakers and religious leaders. And this cooperation is constitutional and ensured by the law. The constitution in Germany allows and regulates some kind of cooperation between the state and religious institutions. This is what the paper is saying. Let's look what is in the reality. Public, social, and health infrastructure like hospitals and nursing homes for the elderly are funded by the state, but organized and mostly supervised through religious organizations. For example, the Diakonie is the social welfare organization of Germany's Protestant churches. The Caritas is the one of the Catholic Church. The religious institutions in Germany also provide services such as pastoral care for those who need spiritual support. The role of interfaith and cross-sector dialogue has been proven effective in preventing violence and hate speech through raising awareness in society about the dangers of religious extremism. It is in this context that we are proud to share with you an organization named Shoulder to Shoulder. Shoulder to Shoulder was founded in 2017 together with Dr. Jürgen Miksch, the director of the Abraham Forum in Germany, with Marlies Horsch, she's working for the Foundation Against Racism in Germany, and Daniel Neumann, who is the director of the Jewish communities in Hessen in Germany, and me as the Secretary General of the Central Council of Muslims in Germany. This foundation supports victims of racial attacks and helps individuals who suffer discrimination in Germany. Our organization has an advisory board which includes public figures like politicians, religious leaders, and union representatives. This initiative focuses on solidarity with victims of racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. We see always that the media, when some kind of attack happened on any individuals, that the media is concentrating on the attackers, not on the victims. And we want, with Shoulder to Shoulder, to stay really shoulder to shoulder with the victims of such kind of attacks. Interreligious dialogue helps the different communities of faith to stay in a dynamic cooperative relation, focusing on their common values such as peace and tolerance, allows religious and social cohesion to spread within the communities and between them. On the level of principles, it is necessary to show tolerance and respect in learning more about the different cultures, common inspiration towards the common good of society is necessary for any partnership to exist in an interfaith context. For such a cooperation to thrive, assistance and supervision from the state and from the civil society and its organization can also be factors of success and stability for cross-sector projects. An example for this would be the 2017 International Conference in Berlin titled Religion's Responsibility for Peace, where religious leaders and representatives of different religions from all over the world participated in dialogue. The event was founded and organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and me as Secretary General of the Central Council of Muslims in Germany have attended and participated in this conference, and we in the Central Council continue to actively attend interreligious dialogue events organized by the state. I think that KAICIID was also a member of this in 2017. As policymakers can provide legal, organizational, and even financial support for dialogue projects, religious leaders must ensure that their organizations and communities are functioning in accordance with the law, with the benefit of society. When policymakers are well informed about the different religious groups by maintaining a constructive relationship of dialogue with their respective leaders, much conflict can be avoided. A problem such as hate speech can only be countered through the unified efforts of government and civil society. Supporting such a cooperation will entail financial aid through funding, technical support through providing spaces and organizing events, as well as legal support by providing guidance and consulting when deemed necessary. Therefore, it is necessary that the policymakers and religious leaders work together to counter hate speech at all levels. The religious leaders should aim at presenting moderate ideologies, faiths, and raising awareness against prejudice. Lawmakers, on the other hand, can provide supervision and guidance. In conclusion, it is important to understand that the problem of hate speech can be efficiently countered only through a respectful cooperation between state and religion through their respective representatives. Another concrete example of organizations engaged in interfaith dialogue in cooperation with the state is the Abrahamic Forum in Germany. Founded around 20 years ago by religious figures from different backgrounds, the Central Council of Muslims was one of the founder of this organization, aiming at interreligious dialogue. Scholars and experts from different faiths, such as the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim religions, are members of the association, which is committed to a peaceful coexistence for all religious creeds, honoring Abraham as their common ancestor. Over 600 events have been organized with Abrahamic teams since 2001 in Germany, particularly in schools and religious institutions. Since 2015, the Abraham Forum in MENA countries was created to include other countries such as Egypt, Morocco, Israel, and others. Delegation visits and educational programs have been successfully organized in most MENA countries. I am the managing director of this forum. Our aim is to advance interreligious dialogue worldwide through organizing events for interreligious cooperation. The forum is also funded and supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany. In closing, I would like to summarize the main points. The relation between policymakers and religion communities should be a cooperation of support, supervision, and transparency. In Germany, this cooperation is established through the Constitution and is implemented by the law, but it needs always the engagement of every individual that it can work, that can go ahead. Where major religious organizations supervise welfare, healthcare, education, as well as spiritual well-being. I come to the last. It is with great interest that I would like to continue the discussion with you, if it's possible, if you have any questions concerning the situation in Germany. The examples of organizations mentioned, if you have questions to the organizations, I would gladly share my perspective with you. Thank you very much for you. And also, I apologize my bad English, my German Arabic English, excuse. Thank you.
We have a first question from Luca, then the lady in the back. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting these cross-sector collaborations. My question is, how far are these collaborations pluralistic in their membership? We see all the time that the religious leader coming together, male religious leader, without female or without young people, and we know that hate speech is related to the gender issues all the time with the women, Muslim women. As a Muslim woman, I am always related to this hate speech about my scarf, about my whatever. And we know that youth are the most affected from and by hate speech. Where are these representative in your collaborations? Have you reflected about it? Thank you.
Yes, about the representation of or the collaboration also with female in the Muslim society, we know that it's a big issue for all of us. In the Central Council of Muslims, we can say, alhamdulillah, on the male level, we have more than 30% women leaders in our organization. This is the positive side, which I can share with you, but the negative side is when we go down to the mosque, we have about 300 mosques in Germany, we don't have no one mosque which is led by a woman. But alhamdulillah, we have women leaders on regional which are representing the Central Council Muslim on different regions and also in the board. So we still have to work. And the same thing I can say with the youth. We tried in the Abraham Forum in Germany, we tried to install a youth program from different faiths, and we have to say that until now we have failed. We didn't get them, and we have to think of different possibilities to perhaps to go to them where they are and not just to invite them to us. This is the reality.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very ignorant how it works in Germany and the administration or in the mosques. But my question, I know that DTIP is quite an influential player in deploying the imams. Then how the Central Council of Muslims and DTIP work? Are you working together? Is it completely separated? Are you also deploying imams to the mosques, or how much influence do you have in that?
Yeah, a very nice question. You're very familiar with the names in Germany, at least. So the Central Council of Muslims is a German Islamic organizations. Our members are from all over the world, but what is our main is that we all are Germans. So we are representing us as citizens of Germany. Then on the other side, there are a lot of different organizations. DTIP is one of them. We have Milli Görüş, we have KAICIID. They are mainly organized from Turkey. With Turkey, they are also getting the imams from Turkey. We don't have such situation in the Central Council. All our imams are all based in Germany, and we have launched the Islam College in Osnabrück. It's a pilot project to make imam trainings in Germany, and we are part of this. As mentioned, I'm also now the spokesperson for the Coordination Council of Muslims, so now I'm also the spokesperson for DTIP on the others, but I'm representing directly, I'm representing Central Council, where we have another model.
So just for my understanding, so some mosques have imams from DTIP and some from your organization?
The DTIP organization has DTIP imams. They are coming from Turkey, and there are a lot of other organizations which don't have this system, and the mosques in the Central Council of Muslims, the imams there are living in Germany, are paid by the mosques themselves. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. El-Yazidi. Thank you. Vielen Dank. So I'd like to close now by first of all thanking all the people who we do not see, who are behind the organization of this panel, including people from KAICIID, but also the European Leadership Council and other organizations that are part of making this happen. And I'd like to thank also our technicians in the back for making this sort of rather smooth interaction between all of us. I'd like to thank also all of you, the participants, all 1, 2, 3, is it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? All 9 of you have actually participated with some questions and comments, and so that's quite a first for me to see that everybody actually has had time to contribute something. So that's also very nice. Thank you for the dialogue. And finally, of course, I'd like to thank our 5 main speakers, and in this order as well, of course, there is Reverend Christian Krieger. And then, of course, online we have Ambassador Injane, who's still with us, hopefully. And then I'd like to thank, of course, Chief Imam Razawi from Scotland, and also online Father Dr. Laurent Bassanese, and finally our last speaker, Mr. Eliazidi. So we've been very fortunate to have this rich presentation of so many different aspects that it does confirm what I think Imam Razawi was saying initially in his preamble, by saying, you know, there's a diversity of situation out there. And we've seen this in the examples that came from, whether it's from our speakers in terms of mostly, but not exclusively, you know, France, Germany, England, and Scotland. I have to make that very clear. As well as, of course, Austria and France, again, with our second speaker online. And we've had from the audience, we've had also a variety of other European countries sort of taken as examples from which you've raised your questions, and including Austria, among other places. So thank you for all of this. I think that it shows the diversity and the richness. The other thing it shows is that the structures, you know, there are many structures in place, but there are different levels of development, both within faith communities, within multi-religious cooperation, as well as the structures that link the political governance realities that are different from country to country with the different structures of religious and multi-religious organizations in different countries. So it's work in progress in many ways to monitor and understand sort of that diversity of structures. But one thing is certain, is that it's alive, it's growing, and I think that collaboration, which is essential to combat in a unified way hate speech, is coming together in a nice way, not undermining, of course, the increasing amount of work that we still have ahead of us in tackling these challenges. So thank you for all of you. Again, merci. Thank you, and see you later. Enjoy your break. Bye.